Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. Strengths versus weaknesses. Starting off with Conor Benn's strengths. Number 1, speed. He's faster than Chris Eubank Jr. Not that Chris Eubank Jr. is slow. Certainly not for a middleweight. He's one of the faster middleweights out there, although he's not as quick as he was a few years ago. There has been quite a noticeable slowdown. And of course, Conor Benn is coming up from 147 and 154 pounds, and he was quick in those weight classes. At 160, he's going to be by far the fastest opponent that Chris Eubank Jr. has fought in a pro ring. And it's going to be interesting to see how he copes with Conor Benn's speed, especially in the early going. Number 2, energy and work rate. Conor Benn is the younger guy here by several years, and so the energy and work rate are definitely on his side, especially with him being the naturally smaller man. Generally speaking, smaller fighters throw more punches and are more energetic, and I expect that to be the case here. Benn will use his extra energy to try and outwork Chris Eubank Jr. Number 3, head movement. Both guys do move their head quite regularly, but Eubank Jr. tends to get caught with his chin in the air a bit more often than Conor Benn does. Benn's the shorter fighter, lower center of gravity, tends to duck underneath shots a lot, bobs and weaves and rolls as he's coming forward, and then punches out of the crouch. So that's definitely a strength for him. Number 4, combination punching. Now, both of these guys are combination punchers, but again, at this stage of Eubank Jr.'s career in his mid-30s, he's not the combination puncher he used to be. The shots don't come as thick and fast. In my view, Conor Benn once again has the advantage in this particular area. And number 5, stamina. We saw in Conor Benn's last 2 fights, which both went the distance, that he's got stamina for days. He can punch and punch and punch till the cows come home, no problem. And I expect him to have the advantage over Chris Eubank Jr. here as well, since he's the smaller fighter, the younger fighter. And it's up to Eubank Jr. to try and find ways to sap Conor Benn's stamina, such as tactical clinching and getting rough and physical on the inside, leaning on him as far as he can get away with it. Moving on to Conor Benn's weaknesses. Number 1, lack of height and reach. Now, a lack of height and reach can actually be a strength or a weakness depending on a variety of factors, depending on how well the taller opponent utilizes his height and reach quote-unquote advantage, and how good the shorter fighter is at moving his head to get in close and being quick enough with his short arms on the inside, where he should get the better of it, because his punch arc up close should be tighter than his opponent's punch arc. So his punches should get to the target quicker. So there's an asterisk next to lack of height and reach being a weakness for Conor Benn. It's potentially a weakness if Eubank Jr. can utilize his height and reach effectively. Number 2, Conor Benn is the naturally smaller man. We're not talking about height and reach now, we're talking about body mass. And it's not just the fact that being naturally smaller implies that you're not quite as strong as your opponent, although that might not necessarily be the case. It's the fact that, in this case, the opponent, Chris Eubank Jr., is used to fighting people far bigger than Conor Benn and, again, presumably far stronger. Conor Benn is not used to fighting people as big or strong as Chris Eubank Jr. And if his last couple fights are anything to go by, Conor Benn, against 154-pounders who he couldn't budge, he might also struggle with the size and strength of Eubank Jr. if it becomes a physical fight. Number 3, inexperience. Conor Benn has not fought or even won at the same level as Chris Eubank Jr. has. Nor has he had as many fights as Chris Eubank Jr. has had overall as a pro. Eubank's had 37 bouts, Conor Benn's only had 23 bouts. Eubank Jr. has been on the big stage on multiple occasions in the past. He's used to the pressure. He's used to the big occasion. He's used to these hectic fight weeks with all the media obligations and what have you. He's used to the shenanigans behind the scenes. And the experience of Eubank Jr. should also allow him to navigate the rounds a little bit more cleverly than Conor Benn. Know when to tie up and take a break. Know the little veteran tactics. How to smother on the inside and do these little tricks to frustrate the smaller, younger man. He's been there, seen it, done it, bought the t-shirt several times over. Whereas for Conor Benn, this is pretty much his first rodeo as far as a big fight. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will negatively affect him. Some fighters reach the big stage for the first time and they take to it like a duck to water, whereas other fighters get stage fright. It remains to be seen how Conor Benn reacts. But as I say, it's always better to have experience than not. So it's an advantage for Chris Eubank Jr. and a potential disadvantage for Conor Benn. Number 4, Conor Benn has a tendency to be a little predictable as a fight unfolds. In the early rounds, because of his speed and ferocity and punch variety, he can overwhelm opponents. But once they get used to that speed, if they're able to take the power, Conor Benn doesn't tend to switch it up much after that. He continues to try and do the same thing at the same pace. I mean, he slows down somewhat as the fight progresses, but he doesn't really alter the speed or power of his shots much. It's like the same speed and the same power, and the opponents can start to get used to it and then time Conor Benn because of this somewhat predictable approach. We saw that when he fought Peter Dobson last time out. Once he got over the initial shock and awe in the early rounds from Conor Benn, Dobson started to time him. He started to even push Conor Benn back in spots and land good shots because, again, despite not having much speed himself, Peter Dobson, he became accustomed to Conor Benn's speed. And as the old saying goes, timing beats speed. Not that Peter Dobson came close to beating Conor Benn, he didn't, but he certainly became more competitive as the fight progressed. As I say, in my view, partly down to the fact that Conor Benn can be somewhat predictable. Number 5, power. Now, Conor Benn showed good power before his ban at 147 pounds. But since that time, he's fought twice at 154, and he hit both those opponents with everything, including the kitchen sink, but he couldn't get them out of there. Here he's fighting Chris Eubank Jr. at 160, who's been used to taking punches from middleweights and super middleweights. So is Conor Benn's punching power going to have the desired effect against the biggest opponent he's fought so far in his professional career? By far the biggest. I'm not saying that his power can't have an effect on Eubank Jr., but what I will say is there's a question mark next to it. So it isn't necessarily a weakness, but a potential one. All right, let's move on to Chris Eubank Jr. and first of all, his strengths. Number 1, height and reach. As I said with Conor Benn, this all depends on how well Eubank Jr. is able to utilize the height and reach, and it's partly contingent on Conor Benn not being able to avoid Chris Eubank Jr.'s shots at long range or his clinch game on the inside. Presumably, he'll be looking to smother Conor Benn, at least in the early rounds, to contain those fast combinations of his and tire him out a little bit. On the outside, you would have thought, as long as Chris Eubank Jr. is throwing punches from the right range, that he will have the advantage. Number 2, experience. Again, Eubank Jr. may have a mental, emotional, and tactical advantage because of his experience. He's the tricky old veteran in this fight. Number 3, power. Now, Chris Eubank Jr. has never been a massive puncher, 160 pounds, nor at 168, but he's not feather-fisted either. If he catches you right, he can stun you, he can hurt you, he can knock you out, especially if he catches you with a shot that you don't see. And of course, he is by far and away the biggest opponent that Conor Benn will have fought so far as a professional, and so presumably, he'll be the biggest puncher that Conor Benn has fought as a professional. I can't imagine that there's anyone on Conor Benn's record, and I've seen all of his fights, that hits as hard as Chris Eubank Jr. It remains to be seen how Conor Benn copes with that power. So as I say, for me, that's an advantage for Eubank, one of his main strengths here. Number 4, the uppercut. The right uppercut, to be specific. Chris Eubank Jr. has always had a fantastic right uppercut. It's by far and away his best punch. Against a shorter guy like Conor Benn, he'll surely be looking to walk him onto it. And if he does and he catches him clean, who knows what's going to happen? Conor Benn's never been hit by a man that size. Certainly not in 10-ounce gloves. And number 5 is the natural size and strength of Chris Eubank Jr. If he can impose himself physically on Conor Benn, he can take away a lot of his energy without even punching, just by mauling him, just by smothering him, just by pushing him back. Conor Benn is a fighter who likes to come forward. If Eubank Jr., particularly in the mid to late rounds, can use that natural size and strength that he has to push Conor Benn back, he could cause problems. He could tire Conor Benn out. So that's definitely a potential strength for him, his natural size and physical strength. Moving on to Eubank Jr.'s weaknesses. Number 1, his age and potential lack of hunger. The footage we've seen of Chris Eubank Jr. in the gym, where he's training, hitting bags, he doesn't appear to train with the same ferocity that he did when he was in his late 20s or mid 20s. And that's to be expected. Very few fighters do train with the same intensity and ferocity at this age as they did when they were 10 years younger. And so Eubank Jr. is coming up against a younger man in Conor Benn, who's likely going to have more energy, who's maybe more driven, more ferocious, etc. than he is right now. Eubank Jr., as far as I'm concerned, is never going to be able to match Conor Benn's hunger and ferocity and energy levels because of his age and also the fact that Conor Benn is a naturally smaller man. Generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, smaller fighters have higher energy levels, and throw more punches to start with. So the age is a potential weakness here for Chris Eubank Jr. Number 2, Eubank Jr. is the slower fighter. I kind of already spoke about this, but just to reiterate, it's not that Eubank Jr. is slow per se. He's still one of the quickest middleweights out there, but he's not as quick as he used to be. And for my money, he's not as quick as Conor Benn. So he's going to have to overcome a speed disadvantage in this fight, the way I see it. Number 3, Eubank Jr. throws less punches than Conor Benn, certainly these days. Again, bigger fighters tend to throw less, and older fighters tend to throw less. Eubank Jr. is both of those in this contest. And so that leaves the potential for Conor Benn to outwork Chris Eubank Jr. He doesn't necessarily need to knock him out if Conor Benn goes on to win this fight. Perhaps he could just out-hustle the bigger, older man. And that's not my prediction, by the way. I did my prediction in a separate video. Number 4, leaky defense. Neither of these guys is Floyd Mayweather defensively, or Pernell Whitaker. But from what I've seen, especially in the last few fights, Eubank Jr.'s defense is more leaky than Benn's is. Eubank Jr. tends to move his upper body almost in like a pendulum motion with his hands down. Sometimes he'll block shots. He was certainly blocking a lot more punches in the Liam Smith rematch than he did in their first fight, and was blocking a lot more shots in that fight than he did against Seremeta as well. Against Seremeta, he got caught quite a few times. Again, with his hands down, chin in the air. He'll move his head from side to side, but he'll do so with his hands down. He's going to need to be a lot more defensively responsible in this fight than he was against Seremeta if he's going to win. He's going to need to tighten that defense up and be very disciplined behind his jab, using tactical clinching, etc. I think he can do it, but it's going to take a concerted effort. I'm judging his defense on his last fight against Seremeta, and also the first fight against Liam Smith, and most of the fights he's had in his career. It's only on a couple of occasions where he's really tightened the defense up. And again, Conor Benn doesn't have a great defense himself, but I just think it's a little bit better than Eubank's defense overall. Or at least it has been up to this point. We'll see whether Eubank can improve it for this fight to the point where it's actually better than Conor Benn's defense. And number 5, chin. Now, this isn't necessarily a weakness for Chris Eubank Jr. I'm putting a question mark next to it. For the longest time, at middleweight and even super middleweight, he had the reputation of having a very good chin. He'd never been down, at least not officially. I thought that his knee did touch the ground in the George Groves fight, but that notwithstanding, he'd never taken account, and he'd been hit with some big shots from guys who can punch. So going up against a blown-up welterweight in Conor Benn, who couldn't get rid of a couple of junior middleweights, the assumption of a lot of people would be that there's no way Conor Benn can hurt Eubank Jr. But then, of course, we have to look at the first Liam Smith fight, where Eubank Jr. got stopped early, hurt badly, dropped, referee waved it off. Now, Eubank Jr. insinuated that he got hit with an elbow. A lot of fans seem to think he got hit with an elbow. I did a video where I went through that sequence frame by frame, and I proved conclusively that he did not get hit with an elbow. He simply got hit with a big left hook, and he's got high cheekbones, Chris Eubank Jr. The gloves that Liam Smith was wearing are called Everlast Elite. If you've ever tried on those gloves, they've got a thin layer of high-density foam laminated to the leather inside the glove. Underneath that thin layer of high-density foam, you've got horsehair. Those gloves, I'm telling you because I've tried them on. You can go to shops like BoxFit, for example, in Harold Wood in Essex and try them on for yourselves. It's like having a brick on your hand because the outer layer of foam is extremely dense and hard, and it's only a thin layer, and beneath that is horsehair, which compresses down extremely easily so that you can basically feel the knuckle right through the glove. Liam Smith threw those bricks for gloves in the form of a left hook, caught Eubank Jr. on that high cheekbone of his, swole up his eye. Again, I did a video at the time going frame by frame, proving that it wasn't an elbow. Have a look at the video. And so what does it mean that Eubank Jr. got knocked out in that fight and hurt by Liam Smith, who himself was coming up from 154 pounds? It could mean that Eubank Jr.'s punch resistance is not what it used to be. It could mean that he's struggling at the weight. It could just mean that Liam Smith caught him on the sweet spot. Sometimes it's just a case of a fighter not having been caught in the right way yet. It's like Paul Williams when he fought Sergio Martinez. In the first fight, he seemed impervious to Martinez's power. But in the second fight, one clean left hand knocked Paul Williams out cold. He hit the canvas face first, and he was unconscious with his eyes open. Martinez, despite hitting Paul Williams with a lot of shots in their previous fight, never caught him on the sweet spot the way he did in the rematch. And that was early. So it could just be that with Eubank Jr. as well. Who knows? I'm sure that Conor Benn will test his chin. Again, he's only a welterweight / 154 pounder, and we'll find out soon enough how Eubank Jr.'s chin stands up to Conor Benn's power. As I said earlier on, you would have thought that a career middleweight and super middleweight wouldn't have an issue taking the power of a Conor Benn, but Benn is very fast, and it's usually the shots that you don't see that hurt you the most. Anyway, that concludes this Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn strengths versus weaknesses. Leave me your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And before I go, make sure you check out my most recent bit of exclusive boxing content on Patreon. It's a 3-hour film study on George Foreman. That's 3 hours of me analyzing video footage, not still images, actual video footage of the most significant fights in George Foreman's career and explaining and breaking down what made him so effective. It wasn't just brute force and physical strength and punching power. No. Foreman had a much better boxing brain and was much more crafty and clever, even when he was young, than people realize or give him credit for. And I break it all down in a 3-hour George Foreman extravaganza on my Patreon page. If you want to access that video and many other boxing film studies I've done, as well as countless podcasts and what have you, just head on over to my Patreon page, which is called the Brotherhood of Reason, and select the tier called the Boxing Brotherhood. There's no contract, there's no commitment. You can cancel at any time, just like Netflix, and it's very reasonably priced. If you just want to sign up for 1 month and then check out, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, don't miss out on my George Foreman film study. You can access that and my entire back catalog for a very cheap price. It's great value. All of the links are in the description below. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Make sure you guys like this video, share it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out. If you want to access this video along with hundreds of hours worth of other exclusive boxing content, as well as our members chat, just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called the Boxing Brotherhood. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time, just like Netflix, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. Just download the app from the Play Store or the App Store. All the links are in the description box below. And just a quick money-saving tip for Apple users. If you purchase your Patreon subscription on the desktop site or on Android, then you'll avoid the ridiculous 30% fee that Apple charges for purchases made on the iOS app. So if you're on iPhone or iPad, save yourself some money by buying your subscription on the actual Patreon website or on Android, because it's a lot cheaper. Once you've made that initial purchase, you can then use the Patreon app on your iPhone or iPad thereafter to access and enjoy your content as normal.